Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are going to see what if Naruto become one of 7 swordsmen and met with Yugao on his journey part 2. Hope you will enjoy this video, so before we start please like the video and subscribe to our channel and hit bell notification, it motivates me to upload more fanfics for my lovely audience. So let's get started. Waking up with a loud groan, Naruto lifted his head groggily from his pillow while palming his forehead. So much for the Kyuubi's healing factor. I can't get cancer, but I can get a hangover. He muttered out in a seemingly rare monotone voice. I'm not going to allow you to die since it would result in my death too. A hangover doesn't exactly kill you, does it now, Ninjin? The noisy fox's deep voice rung in his head, causing his headache to get much worse. Still, what's even the point to this? Naruto muttered in his head, letting his head fall onto the soft pillows again with closed eyes. The large fox seemed to be smirking to himself as he responded, being locked up behind these bars with sewer water to knees, I believe I deserve some kind of entertainment, noisy gaki. Touché, Naruto mumbled out to himself, flipping onto his back as he stared at the ceiling that seemed to still be spinning around. Swinging his legs over the bed, Naruto grabbed his head with a nauseous look on his face as he started to make his way out of his room, knocking over a chair and his sheathed sword before he finally got through the door, into the kitchen in front of the sink. In the kitchen, Kakashi was seated with a large eye smile as he enjoyed his morning coffee. Want some sake to go with your coffee? He asked with a light chuckle. Please, if you mention alcohol again I'll throw up in the sink, Naruto whispered, rinsing his face with the cold tap water. Humming to himself, Kakashi turned back to his warm coffee. Does sound like an awful amount of cleaning. Fine, I won't bring it up again. Thanks, Naruto finally responded after having dried his face with a towel, and seating himself in front of Kakashi while gratefully accepting a pre-prepared coffee mug filled with said content. Kakashi watched quietly as Naruto took a sip of the warm liquid. So, what are your plans for today? Junin Uzumaki. Kakashi asked with a hidden smirk. Naruto put down the coffee mug with a smirk of his own. Junin Uzumaki, it had a nice sound to it in his own opinion. Well, not quite sure really. I do have a meeting with Kurenai later at her place to discuss genjutsu, but that first later on tonight. I suppose I'll go by my parents' house and see if there is anything left behind. Nay. Getting hot for teacher, Naruto? Kakashi asked teasingly, making the blonde blush while sending a glare his way. Naruto sighed loudly, slumping back into his chair. No, I'm not. The only thing Ero Sennin couldn't really teach me that well was genjutsu, so I thought I'd seek out an expert on the matter. Sure, Kakashi mumbled while smiling, causing Naruto to groan loudly. By the way, a lot of your parents' stuff was moved into storage because of their value. Weapons, jutsu scrolls, stuff like that. It surprises me that you were able to find those notes on kenjutsu when you snuck around the village. I see, I guess I'll go see Ba-chan first then, but I also want to see if there is more stuff of personal value. Naruto sighed, making Kakashi nod in understanding. Nodding again, Kakashi stood up and moved over to place his mug in the sink, and waved with a smile. Well, I have an appointment with Hokage-sama already, I'll let her know to expect you later. How late are you? Naruto then chuckled with his eyes closed and instead of answering Kakashi just smiled widely. Yane. Kakashi found himself standing in front of Tsunade's office a few moments later with his favorite book in his hand. Humming quietly to himself, he looked up at the wall and noticed he was only around 10 minutes late. Well, more reading time for him then. Kakashi, if you are going to stand outside that door and waste my time for one more second I will bash your head in. Tsunade suddenly yelled at the top of her lungs, making Kakashi sweat drop with a nervous gulp as he clapped his book shut. Opening the door, while giving his infamous smile, Kakashi opened the door slightly and stuck his head inside. Ma, you called Tsunade-sama. Scoffing a bit at the Junin's tardiness, Tsunade leaned back into her chair and crossed her arms beneath her bust. Hi, now get your ass in here. You've wasted a lot of time already. Nodding quietly, Kakashi pulled the door fully open to see Jiraiya leaning up against the wall on the other side of the room. Jiraiya-sama, he politely addressed, causing the Sannin to smirk with a nod in return. Leaning back up from her chair, Tsunade propped her elbows on her desk and intervened her fingers in front of her face. What I'm going to run through you now, Kakashi, is an S-rank secret. This idea has yet to gather the needed financials and the required suspects. I tell you beforehand because you will essentially be the leader of this initiative. Looking beyond confused, Kakashi's lazy gaze traveled between Tsunade and Jiraiya, both looking quite serious for a change. Okay, understood. Good. As you know, the Sannin is a split-up group of shinobi. Jiraiya is never in the village, and always around in the world managing his spy network, writing his smut, and peeking on women in international bathhouses. I've become the Hokage and is essentially trapped behind this desk day in and day out unless a Kyuubi-class catastrophe hits the village. And well, you know about Orochimaru already. Tsunade paused, allowing Kakashi to process this information. I'm well aware of this, but what has this to do with me, or this initiative? Kakashi asked quietly, his curiosity piqued. Jiraiya decided to give in his own to Ryo at that. As you know, every other great nation so far has their group of exceptional shinobi to handle stuff that is too troublesome, or simply too hard and dangerous for ordinary shinobi. Kiri has its 7 swordsmen, Iwa has its demolition corps, Kumo has their tag team brothers, and Suna is apparently reinstating their training program for puppet users. I see, so you fear Konoha is lacking in this department since the sad fate of the Sannin? Kakashi asked softly, a lot of the pieces to the puzzle starting to be put together. Tsunade and Jiraiya gave a synchronized nod at that, and the busty Hokage added, hi. These groups are not only a huge sign of the village's strength but also their go-to for completing missions that are simply not meant for simple shinobi. Isn't that what the Anbu are for though? Kakashi mumbled, a bit confused. Sighing, Tsunade rubbed her forehead softly and Jiraiya gave a dry chuckle and decided to answer, while that is indeed supposed to be the case, it isn't stopping the other villages from doing this. And to be fairly honest, the Anbu in the village has seen better days. I mean, they are next to non-efficient during the invasion 4 years ago. Which is why we'll be putting together a plan to get our Anbu program back up to speed. Times have passed and their system and methods are beyond outdated, but that is not important right now. This group we'll be creating are going to be Konoha's pillars of strength. Your feats will show that despite what Konoha has gone through the last few decades, we are still standing strong as ever, and not to be messed with. Tsunade explained, a small smirk forming on her lips. Nodding with a satisfied look, Kakashi decided to give an audible sigh though, and I assume you want me as the leader, because of my expertise in leading a team. You must have looked through my history in the Anbu then. Indeed I have. You have an almost perfect mission record and is still the most respected captain there have been in years. You'll have to get yourself together though, we can't have the leader of this team slacking on the job. This job is not only to handle hardships of difficult missions but also to give the outside world a glimpse of Konoha, as I said. Tsunade nodded in confirmation. So, who's on this team? And do we have a name? Kakashi asked subtly. Jiraiya took this as his cue, and grabbed 5 folders out of his haori, and placed them on the desk in front of Kakashi. This is the 5 people that are at the time considered to join. Your file is here, so I'll put that one aside if you decide to accept this role. The rest is up for debate and change, and we'd like your input on this. Frankly, you've been around the village more than us the last decade, and been interacting with its shinobi more too. Kakashi hummed as he slowly went through each file on the table, with the last one getting his interest piqued. A few years ago I would have questioned someone's sanity for putting this file here, but now I'm not really that surprised. I guess I should have expected this one. Jiraiya smirked widely at that, Tsunade and I discussed that it would be a waste to keep having him doing simple missions with his current strength, so he was the first prime candidate we had in mind for this initiative. Nodding with satisfaction from Jiraiya's answer, Kakashi tapped his fingers on the desk before he pulled 2 files away. These 2 are great shinobi with all due respect, but I might have 2 other nominations that would suit the team a little better. Waltzing through the busy streets of Konoha, Naruto had a cigarette trapped between his loose lips as he minded his own business. People were still treating him like yesterday, and it was confusing him greatly. A few years ago they looked at him like he was a freak and a pariah, but now they seemed almost kind to him. Couldn't they recognize him? Or did Tsunade have a hand in this? Were the questions that had yet to be answered. It didn't matter anyway. A lot of his youth had already been spent on trying to please the ignorance of certain civilians until he figured that the only acceptance he needed was from his friends. The rookies, the senseis, his mentor Jiraiya and their Hokage, or as he would call her, his Ba-chan. The rest of the people could kiss his naked butt for all he cared, but it did feel nice to have a more cozy welcome than he thought he would. Throwing the remains of his cigarette onto the ground and stomping on it, Naruto adjusted his haori and started to enter and waltzed through the Hokage tower, until he found himself outside of Tsunade's door. Knocking quietly on the door, he opened it slightly and stuck his head inside to still see Kakashi seated with the 2 Sannin. "Oh, sorry for interrupting, I'll come back later." "No, please come in. We were about to call for you anyway." Tsunade answered quickly before the blonde could close the door. Raising a curious brow at that, Naruto stepped inside and closed the door behind him as Jiraiya gave him a knowing smirk. "So, how's the headache? And the lady?" Naruto rubbed his head at the first part, and then suddenly blushed at the second part. "Lady? What are you talking about? Stop tormenting the poor body, Jiraiya." "Naruto, despite how much Jiraiya wanted to set you up with the bartender last night, Kakashi and I made sure it didn't go that far." Tsunade quickly answered, making Naruto sigh out with relief as Jiraiya grumbled about spoilsports. "That's a relief," the blonde sighed, rubbing the sweat off his forehead. "Why don't you want to get laid with such a beautiful female creature?" Jiraiya raged up at the blonde, steam blowing out of his ears. Naruto grew a large tick mark at that, and flew up in Jiraiya's face, "Because unlike you I don't collect STDs like they are trading cards." As Naruto threw his insult, Jiraiya seemed to fly out of the window like a punctured balloon, causing the entire room to sweatdrop at his reaction. Coughing into her hand, Tsunade spoke up again. "Anyhow, Naruto, we have something very important to discuss with you." "Yeah, I got a request too, my family's stuff, and my heritage. I would like to have it back." Naruto requested politely, and Tsunade nod with a small smile. Smiling a little more, she gave a comical thumbs up. "Already ahead of you, the stuff is being transported back by the Anbu, so by the end of tomorrow it should all be there." Tomorrow?" Naruto stuttered lightly. Tsunade raised a brow at that, shrugged. "If you had any idea on how big your family's vault of techniques and notes were, you wouldn't be surprised. Plus there is a lot of heavy lifting. Kushina owned a ton of weapons." "That I'm not surprised about," Naruto sighed, smiling fondly at the memories of the few notes he had been able to gather. There were tales and stories about all of his mother's adventures with experimenting with weapons, learning not only kenjutsu but tons of other weapons as well. "Anyhow, you had an offer for him, Tsunade-sama." Kakashi cut in, surprising the blonde male. Tsunade smirked widely at that, dropping a ton of files onto the desk. "That's right. Now, Naruto, I have an offer for you, and I hope you'll accept it. I just have one warning. If you do agree, Team 7 will be disbanded with effect immediately." "Then why would I even consider it? Kakashi-sensei, you can't be serious." Naruto asked loudly. This offer was outrageous. He treasured his team with everything he had almost, so why disband it? Sighing softly, Kakashi waved his hand lazily. "Please Naruto, let Tsunade-sama speak." Huffing a bit at this sensei, Naruto leaned back against the door he had entered through earlier with his arms crossed over his chest, with his eyes carrying an intense look. As I was saying, this is a very important thing for the village. Tsunade started as she explained everything in detail of which she had told Kakashi. Every little detail sinking into Naruto's brain, making him frown more and more by the second he kept letting Tsunade speak. And that is why Jiraiya and I discussed this initiative. Even without this Naruto, it was unavoidable to let Team 7 stay the way it was forever. Sakura is going to be sad about this too, but the paths you are choosing are leading in different directions in our time. The only way it worked when I was still working with Jiraiya was because it was wartime. And look now, even we have split up because the war ended. Tsunade tried to reason, while she was expecting an angry outburst from the blonde any moment now. Naruto stood quiet a few more minutes until his lips turned up into a sad smile. I understand. You what now? Tsunade asked, not sure if she heard correct. I understand your reasoning, Ba-chan. Not only is this for the village's strength, but with having this image to the outside world with this team, more contractors would without a doubt contact Konoha if it ends up successful, Naruto mumbled out, starting to understand the huge importance of this. Frowning lightly, Tsunade leaned back into her chair, making it creak quietly. I know it's hard for you. Your team has had a dream of getting back together one day, all of you. The sad truth is simply that the world is changing by the day, more and more desperate measures are required by us with each passing year, and even if I do want to put people's happiness above everything else, there can't be any happier if we let our economy fall even further. We also can't afford to let the other nations get the idea that we are weakening. The last thing we need after the last 2 decades is another war. You don't have to explain it anymore, I understand the seriousness of this. It's also beneficial in hunting down terrorists like Akatsuki and Orochimaru. I just can't understand why I'm a candidate though. I'm the Jinchuriki, wouldn't the Akatsuki be after me? Naruto asked, his voice returning to its normal tone. Tsunade gave a small smirk at that, confusing the hell out of the blonde. Sometimes, our desires are our weaknesses. Hell, look at Jiraiya with his female problems. He has had more trips to the hospital than a frontline fighter in the Second War because of his weakness for naked breasts. Tsunade tried to joke a little, causing the blonde male to chuckle a little bit. That's true. Nodding at him, Tsunade pushed the folders forward on the desk and said in a soft tone, you don't have to accept yet, but please consider. I accept. I'll be a member. You what now? Tsunade asked with great shock written across her face. Naruto smiled lightly as he walked forward after pushing himself off the door, and looked at the files spread across the desk with great interest. If Kakashi-sensei is having so much faith in this, that he'd join instead of continuing on Team 7. Then it must be really important. I guess I'll need to talk with Sakura then. Kakashi stayed quiet but nodded nonetheless. This had been inside his mind for hours until Naruto showed up. He had given it a lot of thought and in the end, accepted. Even if he loved and treasured his team, he knew from experience from his Anbu and Team Minato days that nothing lasted forever. To move forward, steps had to be taken, and this was a huge step in the right direction. I'll handle Sakura. And well, that went better than I expected. Excellent. I'll call for the other candidates that Kakashi and I have picked out. You guys will all meet here tomorrow evening. In the meantime, Kakashi has agreed to help me fund this project, but for the rest of the funds to come in there might go a small month before the initiative starts for real. Tsunade explained quickly, causing Naruto to give a small smirk. I'll help with the funds, take as much as you need from my family's bank account you need before handing me the account details. I'll gladly support the future of the village, and again if Kakashi-sensei even sacrificed money he could have used for Ero Sennin's books on it, then I'll do the same to support it. Naruto added in with a big smile, making Kakashi smile proudly at his student's maturity. Nodding her head deeply in gratitude, Tsunade smiled brightly and slammed her fist into her hand. All right then. A new era for Konoha has yet again begun, and you guys will be the front of it. Now, leave. I'm sure there is other stuff you want to do this afternoon instead of sitting in an office all day. As soon as she had said that, Kakashi and Naruto looked at each other and sweat dropped before shunshining out of the office. As the former members of Team 7 had left, Tsunade sighed with a small frown as she called, Bor. Hokage-sama. The Anbu addressed as Bor answered as he dropped from the ceiling, kneeling in front of the Hokage's desk. Please send word for Sakura Haruno, I have some sad news for her. 4x. While Naruto was normally seen with a smile on his face, he was now seen with a small frown as he sat on the soft covers of his bed, seemingly staring at the floor. If people would see the face and behavior he had in private, they would question if Naruto ever really returned home. Sighing heavily, the blonde pulled a picture off his nightstand and stared at the picture that was taken the day he was placed on Team 7. Chuckling a bit, he let a small smile form on his lips as he looked at Kakashi, who was desperately trying to get a decent picture, despite him and Sasuke were once again at each other's throats. It was beginning to feel like all of it was coming apart before it even started. He and Kakashi were leaving for the new initiative. Sasuke had abandoned the village and Sakura. She had yet to become fully aware of the fate of Team 7. If he had to be brutally honest, he didn't mind not being around when that paper bomb would explode. But this was how things were going to be now. Sakura would have to live with it. They weren't kids anymore, they were growing up. Or at least he was. Times were changing too, and he had learned the hard way that how he had been living 4 years ago should have resulted in his death long ago. Lifting his face to stare at his reflection in the lone mirror in his room, Naruto moved a lock of hair out of his face and sighed for what felt like the 100th time today. He hadn't expected to change. Sure, 4 years was a long time and all, but he had never expected that he wouldn't return the same. Would people accept who shined through if he dropped the facade? That was a question he often had on his mind. While he didn't care for what the citizen thought of him, his friends and comrades were another matter. If he suddenly wasn't the same anymore, would they still see the Naruto Uzumaki they went to the academy with? Or would they see a stranger? And even if he didn't just let it show, would it even be long before they'd figure out that something was wrong? Would he even have the words to explain what happened? He didn't know. He, of course, knew what happened, but formulating words to describe the soul-shattering, changing, and reforming pains, he didn't know how to. Would it be easier to show them? He mumbled quietly while pulling his collar down slightly. Reaching down under his shirt, he pulled up 2 necklaces. One being the necklace Tsunade had given him, but he was thinking of returning it. With his resolve and desires changed, should he even have this? Having the necklace in his hand, he started clutching his hand tightly around the crystal. He squeezed tightly with his face turning into a scowl. Gritting his teeth tightly together, he took a deep breath as the scowl disappeared completely from his face before he let the necklace fall under his shirt again. Now wasn't a time to be emotionally comprehended. Having slammed the door shut behind her, Sakura completely ignored her teacher calling her name as she rushed out of the Hokage Tower. How could she have done this? Team 7 was special to her, and true she might be selfish, but didn't she have a right to? She had after all desperately tried to get this team back together for so long. Rushing out of the Hokage Tower, her search started as she scowled with anger and hurt. There was just no way that Kakashi-sensei or Naruto could accept something like this, and abandon the team and friendship they had worked so hard to perfect, right? She craved answers. No, she needed them. Finally, having found one of the people she searched for, she stomped into the dango stand with heavy breathing. The eyes of all the Junin senseis landed on her, along with a purple-haired woman wearing the Anbu uniform, and the creepy proctor from her first Chunin exams. Kakashi-sensei, we need to talk. She spoke in a voice that didn't allow him to refuse. Sighing, the silver-haired Junin clapped his book shut and slowly stood up from his seat. He had seen this coming. It would, after all, only be a matter of time before she would find out. He walked out of the dango shop before motioning Sakura to follow him to someplace that would be appropriate to talk about this. That, and he doesn't want anyone getting caught in the crossfire of her temper. For Kakashi, it was only a few minutes, but to Sakura, it felt like an eternity before they both arrived at their destination. In front of them was Training Ground 7, where the two had a lot of memories. Some good and others bad. Kakashi walked over to a boulder before jumping up and sitting down before his gaze landed on his old student, who just stood in front of his spot with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed, and a face that demanded answers. Well, Kakashi said nonchalantly before pulling out his his book that is always with him before opening it up to where he left off. Well, is that all you can say right now? Just, well, as if you don't even care our team is disbanding at all. Sakura yelled out to her sensei. Kakashi just waited for a moment for her to calm down, but knowing her, that would probably make her madder. Sakura, you have to understand that the village needs this new team to work. Not just for us but all of Hai no Kuni. You should know about the elite groups that represent each major village, so I won't bore you with those details. This team needs to be made and work to show the world that Konoha is not weak or growing lax after all this time. That we are still the strongest village out there, and for good reason. Kakashi said before flipping to the next page in his book before he continued. This team is to be made up of the best or the soon-to-be best that we got here. Tsunade-sama wanted me to be the leader of this team because of me being a student of the Yondaime Hokage, participating in the Third War, having massive amounts of experience in leading teams and combat, along with my time in Anbu. Kakashi said before he raised his hand to stop her from shouting when he noticed her about to explode. Look, I know you're mad and sad, believe me, I am too. But it is not just about us that we have to worry about. It's the whole village we have to worry about. The needs of the village come over our selfish ones. That, Kakashi stopped and jumped off the boulder that Sakura smashed to pieces. I don't care about that. This is our team, the one that brought us all together, and yet you're abandoning it for, what? To please Shisho. Just tell her to get someone else to do it. For crying out loud, they could probably find someone else to lead it than you. That way we all can still be a team, especially when we get Sasuke-kun back to us and free him from Orochimaru's grasp. Sakura yelled before taking a couple of breaths to get the air back in her lungs. Sakura, you have to know I don't want the team to disband either. This was the first team I passed and was truly proud of since being on Team Minato. But sometimes it is not just us we have to worry about, but the people as well. Like I said earlier, this team, if it is a success, will make Konoha look stronger so the civilians and everyone else can be safe. He said before walking over to her and putting a hand on her shoulder. But sacrifices have to be made for the greater good sometimes, and this is one of them. Besides, even if Sasuke did come back, he would still be punished for siding with Konoha's biggest traitor and the man who killed Sandaime-sama. Him being executed would be a very likely option as well. Sometimes you just have to move on, Sakura. Whether it is easy or not. Kakashi said in a comforting voice, hoping to appease her. But it was for naught when she slapped his hand away before storming off. Before she left though, she left some last words for him. If you wanna be that way, then fine. See if I care. I'm sure when I convince Naruto to help, he and I can get Sasuke ourselves. And also keep Team 7 alive. She said before finally leaving the training grounds. Kakashi just sighed to himself before going over and picking up his book before walking back to hopefully continue talking with his fellow Jonin. Oh, if only you knew, Sakura. If only you knew. Team 7's former training ground. The wind brushed through his hair as he calmly meditated on a large boulder in the middle of the river that was running through the training ground. Opening his eyes slowly, he scanned the area as the memories of his early Team 7 days flashes before his eyes, how he had been tied to the log and they had been passed when Sakura and Sasuke fed him, or how they had captured Tora together. It all brought a small smile to his face. He would really miss that. Feeling a chakra nature appear behind him on the opposite side of the river, Naruto blinked and got out of his trance before he stood up on the boulder and turned around, watching as a familiar pinkett walked forward through the trees. So this is where you have been hiding. We need to talk, Naruto. Sakura called out as she stood by the shore, making the blonde Uzumaki close his eyes with a sigh. Opening his eyes a mere second later, his piercing blue stare met Sakura's eyes. Let me guess, it's about the initiative. Right. You need to help me convince Shisho and Kakashi-sensei that it's a bad idea. You and he are needed on Team 7 for when we get Sasuke back, then the whole team will be reunited. She called out while being sure that the blonde would listen to her. Sighing heavily, Naruto threw his head back while running a hand through his blonde locks. I'm sorry Sakura, I accepted. What? How could you be so foolish and accept that? Our team will be disbanded, and when Sasuke comes back what and who would he work with? Sakura yelled in outrage. First Kakashi-sensei, and now Naruto too. She started to feel like she was truly the only one looking to get Team 7 back together. Come now Sakura. No reason to throw insults like that. Naruto frowned heavily at her, causing her anger to intensify even further. Am I the only one that really cares about getting our team back together? Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke-kun, me and you. Sakura yelled out with confusion written all over her face as she shook her head at the blonde. Naruto's gaze softened as he sat down on the boulder again. Sakura, nothing lasts forever. It's time to grow up. You are telling me to grow up. The most unpredictable knucklehead shinobi is telling me to grow up. Where is that knucklehead I like to hang out with? He should have come home, he would have understood. Sakura spat out with disgust, her fists trembling with her knuckles turning white as she clenched her fists. Feeling quite offended at that, Naruto scoffed with his gaze hardening, his eyes narrowing dangerously. That knucklehead you speak of saw the truth of this world. That not everything is sunshine and rainbows. The world is not black and white. It is gray and many different shades of gray. He saw the truth of the world where people kill, steal, rape, and plunder like no tomorrow. What did you think would happen if Sasuke did come back? And that's a huge if. He would be punished for betraying the village for Orochimaru in his quest for power. At best he gets under village lockdown and at worst he gets executed. This is not a fairy tale. Sasuke won't come back so he can marry you and all that delusional stuff. Seeing the stuff that plagues this world, it made me grow up. You have yet to see even 2 steps in front of you. So next time you wanna talk to me like that, why don't you grow up before you start your shit? With anger seething through her, Sakura's breathing got intense as her body trembled in place furiously. Gritting her teeth painfully, she leapt off the ground with her fist pulled back, flying toward the blonde's sitting form. Wyu. Narrowing his eyes a bit more, Naruto backflipped off the boulder before it was crushed into 1,000 pieces by Sakura's fist. Flipping onto his feet on the lake, Naruto brushed some of the debris away from his haori. Do you honestly wish to fight me? He asked softly. Are you really that dense? Yes. So stop dodging like a genin and fight. She heaved with intense anger and confusion. Fine then. I'll stop dodging like a genin you say. He says before he instantly appears in front of her before punching her in the face, sending her flying several yards back into the woods. Instead I will dodge and hit you as a Junin should, Chunin Haruno. Remember this cause if you don't you will die then. Come at me with the intent to kill otherwise, you'll get killed yourself. Jumping back onto Like, she growled loudly, I should have known that you got your smart jabs from Kakashi-sensei. Are you even your own person anymore? She yelled with hurt, anger, and visible confusion. How could this happen? They were supposed to a team. Why couldn't they see and understand? I might have been too dumb and naive to stand up for myself in my genin days Sakura, but I will not tolerate this anymore. Cracking her knuckles, Sakura took a fighting stance. When we were out celebrating, Jiraiya said that he was amused by you drawing your sword against Kakashi-sensei. You apparently only do it against a threat, but even before you drew it, you said you could have ended it. Are you a hypocrite? He wasn't a threat while holding back, but he wanted to see it, Naruto responded casually, not seeing what that had to do with anything. Snorting at his response, Sakura motioned for him to come at her with her hands, then come. I want to see it. Swing your sword at me. Closing his eyes at her anger-fueled rage, Naruto shook his head. No, you don't want to see it. You want to pick a battle you can't possibly win. So you say you don't see me as a threat? She yelled at the top of her lungs, starting to get more and more pissed off. Not only was he going to abandon their team, but he was insulting her too. The Naruto she knew wasn't the blonde in front of her. Palming his forehead, Naruto was starting to get pissed too. This shouldn't even be a discussion. What's best for the village and Hai no Kuni should always come first, that was that they signed up for when joining the academy. Their role and place are to put their life on the line for their nation. Not being a selfish and egotistical brat. Since you are apparently looking to get your pride hurt. Frankly, I don't. You're a medic, Sakura. You don't belong on the front lines with me, or at the back. Your place is in the med bay to tend to the wounded. Even with Ba-chan's training, you don't even belong on the battlefield. But that doesn't mean you aren't useful. A medic's job is as important as the shinobi's on the front lines. Perhaps even more so. Naruto said simply, and before anything else could be said, he threw a smoke bomb down on the ground. Sakura covered her eyes as the smoke covered the entire lake and cleared soon after, but as soon as it cleared, Naruto was nowhere to be seen. An hour later, in a small lunch stand serving several kinds of easy foods, or takeaway, Sakura was sitting with one Ino Yamanaka. All seemed rather good, well, if you looked aside from the angry tone a certain Pinkett was using. And then he left. Naruto, he isn't the same person anymore, Sakura finally finished. Her tone softening out at the end as she frowned with a soft gaze, staring into her palms resting in her lap. Ino just blinked several times, seemingly stuck in place with a cup of tea placed in front of her mouth, her lips slightly parted around it. Without answering, she moved again and put the cup down. It had surprised her greatly that Naruto was home after so long, but she found it hard to believe all the things Sakura was saying. Yet on one side, why would she even lie about it? When Sakura noticed Ino wasn't going to say anything, she sighed. Ino, she started softly, getting the blonde Yamanaka's attention. Am I being selfish? Ino nodded with a shrug instantly at that. Most definitely. What do you mean? Isn't it logical for me to want everything to go back to normal? Sakura tried again, trying to find the slightest rational reasoning for her actions other than being selfish about it. What's logical for you in our village is completely different, Sakura. I mean, of course, I understand, but from what you tell me here, this team sounds rather important to the village. Yet it is logical, but only to you. While on the other side, this new team is more logical for the village. And while I don't know Naruto and Kakashi all too well yet, do you honestly think they would do this unless it's really super damn important? Ino spoke out, waving her hands around in the air after each statement. When Sakura didn't answer, Ino just sighed and went again. Have you ever stopped up to consider how hard this must be on them? Sakura's eyes widened as her gaze snapped to Ino's. She started to feel stupid. Such a simple sentence, but how great an impact. She had never stopped up to truly think how they must feel about this. They had treasured Team 7 too. Naruto had almost died to get Sasuke back the first time. Kakashi had lost yet another comrade and one of his students. Could I be in the wrong? Sakura groaned out, slamming her hand onto the table, cracking and splintering the wood. Nodding her head in an instant while sweet-dropping at Sakura's anger issues, Ino opened her mouth. Yes, you are. And not only that, you attacked your teammate. And not a moment before you said that, you explained to me how he is now a Junin, hence your commanding officer, and also the person who effortlessly beat Kakashi Hatake, for crying out loud. I get it. Could you keep it down please? Sakura hissed, as the people of the lunch stand started to stare in their direction. No worries, you already got their attention when you broke the table. Ino shrugged casually. Blushing with embarrassment, Sakura hid her face in her palms as she cringed visibly. What am I supposed to do now? I'm not quite sure, yet there is something bothering me. Raising her head, Sakura looked confused at Ino. What do you mean? What I mean, forehead, is that the way you describe Naruto resemble nothing of the orange-loving moron we went to class with. What he said with medics on the battlefield might be partly right with the exception of maybe Tsunade Shisho and Shizune-chan, but it was a bit cruel and dark to me. Ino mentioned, frowning lightly with an uncomfortable gaze. Nodding a bit, Sakura shrugged with a small smile. He is right though, I'm not close enough to be dependable as a combat medic yet. I want to be like Shisho, and earn my spot on the front lines. That's the spirit. If Naruto is as amazing as you say, then it's going to be a hard job to get there to stand beside him in a battle, but if you work hard enough, then I'm sure you can do it. Ino reassured, clenching her fist with a big grin. Nodding a bit more relieved and less tense than before, Sakura smiled, right. I can't slack off just because Team 7 is no more. So Ino then trailed off, a light pink blush on her face. Blinking in confusion, Sakura tilted her head and stared at her blonde friend. What? Is he hot now? Ino. A few streets away, Naruto gave a quiet sneeze into his sleeve. That was odd, he mumbled, having not felt it coming at all. What is odd? A voice came from behind him, causing him to turn around. Smiling lightly, Naruto gave a small wave. Kakashi-sensei. The silver-haired Junin with gravity-defying hair eye smiled and walked up beside his student, clapping his book shut before stuffing it inside his shuriken pouch. I had an interesting talk with Sakura, it in easy words ended rather heated. And then she ran off to find you. Kakashi mentioned, his eye smile dropping as he watched his blonde student sigh loudly. Nodding his head, the blonde stared down into the ground while crossing his arms. Yeah, she came to me, and our exchange of words and blows were rather heated. You two fought. More like she tried to teach me a lesson and I didn't feel like being a punching bag. Naruto shrugged, feeling a bit guilty over hurting his teammate like that. Sighing, Kakashi clapped his student's shoulder. I don't exactly approve of you being so harsh on your teammate, but it's a good improvement that you won't just take hits from people anymore. She wouldn't listen, so I said some things that might have been a bit harsh to hear. Naruto sighs heavily, clutching his forehead. She'll come around. Just don't let it become a habit. She's still a comrade and a teammate. Kakashi instructs, clapping the blonde on the back. Nodding, Naruto folded his arms across his chest again. It won't. She's also a friend. It just startled me that she can't see the seriousness and importance of this. We are shinobi of Konoha and Hai no Kuni, our role and priority are always to protect the village. That's true in a very mature view, Naruto, but try and see it from Sakura's point of view. Her life for the last 5 years since she came a kunoichi has been Team 7, and to get us back together. It all just dropped over her head all at once, we can't really doubt she wouldn't be upset about it. Kakashi tried to defend his female student, but it wasn't really required since the blonde Uzumaki already understood somewhat. I know. Naruto sighed, closing his eyes slowly. As night began to fall over the village, Tsunade sighed and signed the last piece of paper for the day. Letting out a tired groan, she stood up and stretched. Today had been tiresome. The whole situation with Team 7, and this new team, had been really tiresome. Sighing with another groan, she lifted her head and called out for her assistants, Shizune. Not a moment later, the brunette waltzed in through the door while sighing relieved. Her boss had actually done her job today. You called Tsunade-sama. Yeah, remember to send word out to those people before morning, have them meet here at 12. Especially tell Kakashi not to be late, Tsunade instructed clearly, and her assistant nodded quickly. Hi, I shall see to it being done immediately. Shizune quickly bowed and left to prepare the letters to be sent out. Tsunade watched her assistant and student leave her office, before turning her gaze onto the 5 folders laying across the table. I seriously hope those 5 will be able to get along. Tsunade sighed to herself, rubbing her temples as she looked across the several folders. All were great shinobi in their own right. And they should definitely be an even stronger foe when putting them together. Hundreds of miles away from Konoha, a loud grunt could be heard from a long-haired blonde male. HN. Sasori, my man, your home gets sand in my sandals. If you don't pick up the speed soon, you'll make me wait. I hate waiting. Don't test me, Deidara. The companion now known as Sasori replies, making his blonde fella snort. Sighing loudly, using his straw hat to shield his face from the sun, he grumbled to himself, at least this sand dune will go out with an explosion, a true piece of art. Art is lasting, you dimwit. Art must be preserved, and shall be able to be just that for the remains of time. Sasori grunted back as a response. Snorting more at that answer, Deidara crossed his arms across his chest. No way. Art is beauty, and what is more beautiful than an explosion of fire and lights, the aftermath of smoke to imprint the moment into the people's lives of those who survived. Your ignorance is worth a headache. Get on your clay bird, scout the area so we can get this over with. Time is precious, we don't get enough of it to wait any longer.